come here seeking answers must first confront the shadow that clings to your own soul. Addiction, especially the addiction to pain, is not a superficial wound. It is a ritual enacted by the unconscious, a silent prayer whispered to the archetypes that dwell beneath the surface of your being. You may believe that pain is something external, an enemy imposed upon you by a cruel fate or an unforgiving world. But I tell you now, as one who has stared into the abyss of the human psyche, that pain is not only what you feel, it is also what you choose. It is the dark nectar from which the unacknowledged parts of yourself drink to stay alive. Empaths, you are uniquely susceptible to this addiction because your inner walls are thinner than most. You do not simply feel, you absorb. The emotions of others do not remain outside of you. They become a part of your very blood and marrow. And when you absorb the suffering of others, it entangles with your own wounds until you can no longer distinguish between your pain and theirs. This confusion, this merging, creates a cycle where pain itself becomes the only proof that you are connected, alive, and real. You drink suffering like a sacrament, because somewhere in your depths you fear that without it there will be emptiness. But the truth, my friend, is that what you call emptiness is not a void, it is the threshold of transformation. Let us explore this threshold together. Imagine the ancient alchemists who worked tirelessly, not merely to transform lead into gold, but to awaken the hidden light within matter. They understood that true transmutation requires fire. Pain is the fire that burns through the ego, exposing the rawness of the soul beneath. But when this fire is left unchecked, when you do not learn to master it, it consumes you. You become addicted to the flames, confusing them for warmth, when in truth they are only devouring you from within. I have seen countless souls entangled in this dance. They cling to suffering as though it were their identity, as though their very existence depended upon the constant ache of wounds left open. Why? Because the ego, fragile as it is, will often choose familiar pain over unfamiliar freedom. Freedom is terrifying because it asks you to step into the unknown, to face the archetypes that live in the depths of your own psyche. To overcome the addiction to pain, you must be willing to meet the shadow face to face. You must ask yourself, what do I gain from suffering? What does my unconscious believe it is protecting by holding on to this agony? Perhaps you believe that by suffering, you atone for some hidden guilt. Perhaps your pain is the voice of an abandoned child within you, crying out to be seen. Or perhaps it is the mask of the martyr, an archetype that whispers, your worth lies only in how much you can endure. Empaths often wear the martyr's cloak without realizing it. You sacrifice your own peace in the name of love. But this love is twisted. It is a love that feeds on your own destruction. True love, my dear soul, does not demand that you bleed endlessly. It does not require you to drown in the sorrows of others. Instead, it asks that you hold space for both your light and your darkness, without allowing either to control you. To overcome the addiction of pain, you must learn to hold suffering like a sacred object, one that you can examine and understand, but not worship. Close your eyes for a moment and enter the landscape of your unconscious, there in the silent corridors of dream and memory. you may encounter a figure. It may appear as a wounded animal, a crying child, or even a shadowy version of yourself. This figure is your pain made manifest. It does not come to harm you, but to ask for recognition. So often we run from this figure, burying it under distractions or self-punishment. But if you approach it with courage, if you listen to what it has to say, you will find that it is not your enemy. It is a messenger. It is the gateway through which the self, the totality of who you are, calls you back to wholeness. I once spoke of individuation as the great journey of the soul. To individuate is to bring all parts of yourself into consciousness, to integrate what was once split apart. Empaths, your path to overcoming the addiction to pain lies in this process. For too long, you have identified only with the part of you that feels, that cares, that gives. But what of the part of you that takes, that demands, that longs to be free of the weight of others? What of the shadow that resents the very people you try to save? If you do not acknowledge these parts, they will twist your empathy into a chain. They will make you believe that you are only valuable when you are suffering. This is a lie. The self does not demand your suffering. It demands your wholeness. Consider the dream of a woman I once analyzed. In her dream, she walked through a dense forest, carrying a heavy bundle of thorns on her back. She could feel the blood dripping down her shoulders, yet she dared not put the bundle down. Ahead of her, a clearing opened up, bathed in light, but she could not reach it. She told me, I feel that if I let go of the thorns, I will have nothing. I will not know who I am. This is the illusion of pain. We confuse it for identity, for purpose. But when I asked her to imagine laying down the bundle, she wept. In that vision, she saw her hands were not empty. After all, they were free to reach for the light. You, too, must dare to put down your bundle. But to do so, you must first see it clearly. This is where the work of the unconscious begins. Pay attention to your dreams, for they are the language of your soul. Your dreams will show you where your pain originates. Often in symbols that may seem strange or unsettling, a broken mirror, a wounded animal, a dark sea. These are not random images. They are archetypal, pointing to the places in your psyche where healing must occur. Do not dismiss these images. Write them down, so reflect on them, and ask yourself, what is this dream trying to tell me about my relationship to suffering? Understand that pain, when seen consciously, transforms. What was once a poison becomes a medicine. Just as the alchemist knew that the lead must first be recognized before it can be turned into gold, so too must you recognize the source of your suffering. Perhaps it lies in childhood wounds, in the unmet needs of your inner child. Perhaps it is rooted in ancestral patterns, the unspoken grief of generations that flows through your blood. Empaths often carry not only their own pain, but also the pain of their lineage. You are like vessels designed to hold the unhealed stories of those who came before you, but you are not meant to carry them forever. You are meant to transmute them. This transmutation requires both courage and compassion. Compassion, not only for others, but for yourself. Too often, empaths believe that to love themselves is selfish. They believe that self-compassion is a betrayal of the suffering world. But I tell you, until you can love yourself fully, including your shadow, you will remain enslaved to the addiction of pain. Self-love is not the absence of empathy, it is the foundation of it. It is only when your own cup is full that you can truly give without losing yourself. I will tell you something that may disturb you. There is a part of you that enjoys pain. It may seem strange, even repulsive, but deep within the unconscious lies a fascination with suffering. We see this in myths and stories across cultures. The wounded healer, the suffering hero, the crucified God, these archetypes live within all of us, and when left unchecked, they can lure us into cycles of self-destruction. You must ask yourself, am I choosing pain because it is familiar, because it makes me feel noble or needed? The shadow delights in keeping you trapped in these patterns. For as long as you are consumed by suffering, you will not awaken to your true power. To break this cycle, you must step into the role of the conscious observer. Imagine that you are standing outside yourself, watching the moments when pain arises. Instead of immediately reacting or sinking into the feeling, ask, what is this pain trying to teach me? What story is it telling? In this way, you begin to reclaim your power. You become the alchemist of your own psyche, turning pain into wisdom. The path ahead will not be easy. Healing never is, but within you lies a force greater than any suffering, a force I call the self. The self is not merely your conscious identity, it is the totality of your being, the union of light and shadow, the divine spark that seeks wholeness. When you align with the self, pain no longer controls you. It becomes a guide, a teacher, but never a master. You may wonder why I speak of pain as both a teacher and a danger. It is because, like all forces of the psyche, pain is archetypal. It belongs not only to you, but to the collective unconscious. There is a reason why stories of suffering resonate so deeply with humanity, why we are drawn to tales of sacrifice, tragedy, and redemption. Pain is the crucible through which consciousness expands, yet for empaths, this crucible can become a prison when you are too open, too willing to carry the burdens of others. Pain can masquerade as purpose. It whispers to you, you are only valuable when you are hurting for them. And so you become a silent martyr, walking through life with open wounds, believing that this is a price of love. But what is love, if it demands your self-annihilation? Love, as I understand it, is not the drowning of one soul for the sake of another. Love is the recognition of the divine in both yourself and the other. It is the deep knowing that the self in you mirrors the self in them. When you suffer endlessly to carry their darkness, You rob them of their own path to transformation. You shield them from their own shadow work. This is not love, it is fear disguised as compassion. Fear that if you stop suffering for them, they will abandon you. Fear that your own worth will vanish if you are no longer needed. The addiction to pain feeds on these fears. It convinces you that your sensitivity is a curse, that you are doomed to absorb every wound of the world. But your sensitivity is not the problem. It is your identification with the suffering that blinds you. Imagine a river flowing through the mountains. The river does not cling to the rocks and debris it carries. It simply flows. It is aware of what passes through it. But it does not become those things. You must learn to let the emotions of others flow through you without becoming them. This is the essence of healthy empathy, an empathy rooted in awareness, not in self-sacrifice. In my years of studying the psyche, I have seen that healing always begins with awareness. You cannot change what you refuse to see. And so I invite you to look within, not with judgment, but with curiosity. Ask yourself, when did I first learn to equate love with suffering? Was it in childhood, when I watched my parents sacrifice their joy for each other or for me? Was it in the stories I absorbed, stories of saints, heroes, and mothers who bled to prove their love? These patterns sink into the unconscious like seeds, growing into beliefs that shape our lives without our knowledge. To break free, you must trace the roots of these beliefs back to their origin and bring them into the light. Consider the archetype of the wounded healer, which I often speak of. This figure appears in many myths, the physician who cannot heal his own wound, but uses his suffering to heal others. Empaths often embody this archetype, whether consciously or not. They believe that their pain is the source of their power, that without suffering, they would lose the ability to care or to understand. But the true wounded healer does not remain bound to his wound. He does not worship it. He learns from it and then transcends it, transforming his wound into wisdom. This is what I wish for you, to see your pain, not as your identity, but as your initiation. Imagine a dream in which you are standing in a darkened room, holding a candle. The candle's flame flickers, barely illuminating the shadows around you. In those shadows, you see shapes, faces, memories, fears. Some of them are yours, but many belong to others. You realize that you have been carrying all these shadows on your back like heavy cloaks, and then a voice whispers, you are not meant to carry all of this. Set them down. In the dream, you slowly begin to remove the cloaks, one by one, until you feel lighter, freer. The candle burns brighter, because your own light is no longer smothered. This is what it means to release the addiction to pain. It means choosing your light over the weight of shadows that do not belong to you. But how do you begin this process in waking life? It begins with boundaries. Boundaries are not walls. They are sacred circles of protection. For an empath, boundaries feel unnatural. At first, you have been taught to give endlessly, to say yes when your soul is screaming no, but without boundaries, you will always drown in the emotions of others. I have often said that to individuate, to become whole, you must learn to differentiate what is yours from what is not. This is not selfishness, it is clarity. It is the first step toward transforming your sensitivity from a burden into a gift. When I speak of boundaries, I do not mean that you must harden your heart. On the contrary, your heart must remain open, but it must also be discerning. The heart, when aligned with the self, knows when to give and when to withhold. It knows that saying no is sometimes the highest form of love. It knows that protecting your own energy is not a betrayal, but an affirmation of your worth. You must learn to trust this inner knowing, even when others accuse you of being cold or unkind. Those who have grown accustomed to your suffering will resist your transformation, for it threatens the roles they have unconsciously assigned you. But you must stand firm, for every time you choose yourself, you choose life over death. You choose freedom over addiction. I remember working with a man who was deeply empathic. He would spend his days absorbing the anger and sorrow of those around him, his colleagues, his family, even strangers on the street. By the time he came to me, he was hollow, his own joy drained. When I asked him why he allowed himself to take on so much, he said, "If I don't, they will feel alone. I can't stand to see them in pain." But in truth, he was afraid of his own emptiness. He filled it with the suffering of others, believing it gave him purpose. Over time, I helped him see that his purpose was not to carry everyone's burden, but to find his own center, his own self. When he began to set boundaries, when he allowed himself to feel his own emotions without drowning in others, he discovered a new kind of strength, one that was rooted not in pain, but in presence. Empaths, I ask you, do you know who you are without your suffering? Have you ever allowed yourself to imagine a life where joy, not pain, is the foundation of your existence? If this thought frightens you, it is because your ego has built its identity on suffering. It does not know who you would be without it. But I assure you, beyond the pain lies a self so radiant, so vast, that you will wonder why you ever believed you had to suffer to be real. To reach this self, you must go inward. There is no shortcut. You must confront the parts of yourself you have rejected: the anger, the rage, the selfishness, the desire for freedom. These parts are not evil. They are simply hidden. They are your shadow. And the shadow, when integrated, becomes your greatest ally. It gives you the strength to say no, to choose joy, to stand in your own power without apology. The shadow teaches you that you are not just a vessel for others' pain, you are a being of immense creative force, capable of shaping your own destiny. Consider the symbol of the phoenix. This mythical bird must first burn to ashes before it can rise again. The fire of its death is not the end, but the beginning of its transformation. In the same way, you must allow the false self, the self built on pain and martyrdom, to burn away. This will feel like death, for the ego clings desperately to what is familiar, even when it is destructive. But if you can endure this death, you will rise renewed, with wings that are no longer weighed down by the suffering of others. This rising is not a single moment. It is a process, a rhythm. There will be days when you fall back into old patterns, when the addiction to pain whispers its familiar lullaby. Do not judge yourself for this. Healing is not linear. What matters is that you return again and again to the truth of who you are. Each time you choose presence over suffering, you strengthen the self. Each time you recognize that another person's pain is not yours to carry, you reclaim a piece of your power. You must also learn to create rituals of release. The unconscious speaks through symbols, and so it responds deeply to symbolic acts. Light a candle and imagine it burning away the pain you have carried. Write down the stories of suffering that are not yours, and then tear the paper as if to declare, I release what is not mine. These small acts, when done with intention, speak directly to the psyche. They tell your unconscious that you are ready to break free from the cycle of pain. To step beyond the addiction of pain, you must enter into a dialogue with your unconscious, as if it were a living being. For it is alive in its own way, vast and mysterious, like an ancient forest filled with unseen spirits. When you dream, when you fall into moments of deep emotion or inexplicable intuition, this forest reveals itself in glimpses. You see its symbols, its strange animals, its crumbling houses, its sudden floods and fires. All of these are not mere illusions, but messages from the parts of your psyche that you have not yet met. An empath who is trapped in pain often dreams of drowning, of being pursued, of carrying heavy burdens, because their unconscious is crying out to be recognized. These dreams are a mirror, and when you dare to look into them, they show you the chains you forged. One of the most powerful things you can do is to listen, sit with yourself in stillness, even if it feels unbearable. Pain thrives in the places we avoid. In the silence, we are too afraid to enter. But when you dare to listen to your own inner voice without distraction or judgment, you will hear something deeper than the noise of suffering. You will hear the voice of the self, the eternal part of you that is untouched by wounds. This voice is soft, but it is unyielding. It will call you to rise above the identity of the martyr and into the wholeness that belongs to you. I remember a woman who once came to me, her eyes filled with exhaustion. She had spent years caring for her family, her friends, even strangers, while neglecting herself. She believed that this sacrifice was love. But her dreams told another story. She dreamed of being trapped in a dark house where she was endlessly cleaning rooms that never became clean. I told her, this house is your psyche. You are scrubbing the dirt of others, but your own rooms remain locked. It took time, but she learned to open those doors, to confront the parts of herself that had been silenced for decades. When she did, she discovered a well of anger, sadness, and longing that she had been hiding beneath her compassion. Only when she faced these feelings could she begin to heal. Her empathy became clearer, freer, not rooted in pain but in strength. Empaths often fear their own darkness. You may believe that if you acknowledge your anger or selfishness, you will lose your goodness. But this belief is a distortion. The shadow does not disappear because you ignore it. It grows in power, acting out in unconscious ways. The addiction to pain is often a form of shadow possession, a state where you are unconsciously controlled by your own unacknowledged wounds. You believe you are helping others, but deep inside, you may also be feeding your own need to feel worthy, needed, or superior. This is a harsh truth, but one that must be faced with honesty. When you see your shadow clearly, when you bring its motives into the light, you are no longer its prisoner. Pain has a strange allure because it feels like proof of authenticity. We tell ourselves, if I am hurting, it must mean I am alive, that I care. But this is a trap. You do not need to suffer to prove your compassion. True compassion is not born of suffering, but of understanding. When you understand your own wounds, when you integrate them, you can hold space for the pain of others without drowning in it. You can say, I see you, I feel you, but I will not bleed for you. This is not coldness, this is wisdom. There is an ancient story of the goddess Inanna, who descended into the underworld. To enter, she had to remove her crown, hair, jewels, her clothing, everything that identified her as a queen. She was stripped bare and hung on a hook in the darkness. Only when she accepted this death could she rise again, renewed and whole. Empaths, you must make your own descent. You must face the underworld of your psyche, the place where you have hidden your true self beneath layers of suffering. You must allow the false self to die. The self that believes its only value is to carry pain. This descent will feel like loss, but it is necessary, for when you rise again, you will carry not pain but wisdom. You will be crowned not with suffering but with freedom. I will tell you another secret. Pain is addictive because it provides a sense of control. When you are in pain, you know what to expect. You know its rhythm, its taste. Joy, on the other hand, is unpredictable. It asks you to trust, to open yourself to life's ever-changing flow. This is why so many cling to their wounds. They fear the wildness of true freedom. But freedom is what your soul longs for. The self does not want you to remain in bondage to suffering. It wants you to dance with life, to create, to love without chains. To move toward this freedom, you must engage in the sacred work of integration. Integration means bringing the unconscious into consciousness, making peace between the warring parts of yourself. It means accepting that you are both light and dark, both giver and taker, both strong and vulnerable. When you integrate, you no longer project your pain onto others. You no longer need to save them to feel whole. You realize that every person has their own path, their own shadow to confront. You can support them, but you no longer carry their weight. This is how you break the addiction. Think of the archetype of the wise old man, the guide who appears in dreams and myths to show the hero the way. This figure is not an external being. It is the voice of your own higher consciousness. When you are lost in the maze of suffering, the wise old man speaks softly, urging you to step back and see the bigger picture. He reminds you that your pain is not the totality of who you are. He whispers, "You are more than your wounds." To hear this voice, you must slow down. You must create space in your life for reflection, for solitude, for the inner journey. Sometimes an empath's addiction to pain manifests as a compulsion to fix others. You see someone struggling and you feel an almost unbearable urge to rescue them. This impulse is rooted in your own unconscious desire to heal yourself. You project your wounded child onto them, hoping that by saving them, you will save yourself. But this only deepens your suffering. True healing comes when you turn inward, when you rescue the abandoned parts of yourself, when you hold your own inner child and say, "I see you, I love you, I will not leave you." You begin to break the cycle. The compulsion to fix others weakens, and you can love them without trying to save them. The path I offer you is not easy. It requires that you face truths you would rather avoid. It requires that you sit with your own pain without feeding it. It asks that you dismantle the beliefs that have kept you bound for so long. But in doing this work, you will discover a freedom beyond anything you have known. You will discover that your empathy, when freed from addiction, becomes a light that does not burn but illuminates. There is a moment, a turning point in every healing journey. It is the moment when you realize that you have a choice. You are not a victim of your sensitivity. You are not condemned to suffer endlessly. You can choose to step out of the cycle. You can choose to let go of the story that says, "I am only valuable when I am hurting." When you make this choice, even if it is small at first, you begin to reclaim your power. The chains loosen, the shadows retreat. I invite you now to imagine your life free from the addiction to pain. Close your eyes and see yourself standing in a field of light. Feel the weight of other people's emotions falling away from you. Feel your own energy, pure and strong, flowing through your body. This is who you truly are, not a vessel of suffering, but a being of consciousness, capable of great love, great creativity, and great joy. The world needs this version of you, not the one who is always bleeding, but the one who is whole. When you begin to see yourself as more than a container for pain, something extraordinary happens. You start to reclaim your own myth. Every life is a story, a unique unfolding of symbols, archetypes, and lessons. But when you are bound to suffering, your story becomes distorted. You find yourself playing roles that do not belong to you: the rescuer, the martyr, the silent witness to your own despair. To overcome the addiction of pain, you must rewrite the script. You must step into the role of the conscious creator of your own life. This is not a denial of suffering, but an acknowledgement that suffering is not your only truth. The psyche, much like a dream, speaks through images and patterns. To heal, you must recognize the patterns that repeat in your life, especially those tied to pain. Perhaps you are drawn again and again to relationships where you give endlessly and receive little. Perhaps you find yourself constantly drawn to those who are broken, hoping to mend them while neglecting your own fractures. These patterns are not accidents, they are the language of your unconscious calling you to awaken. When you see these patterns clearly, you gain the power to change them. You realize that your addiction to pain is not fate, it is a habit of the psyche, one that can be unlearned. Empaths often confuse suffering with depth. You may believe that to feel deeply means to hurt deeply, but the depth you long for is not found in endless suffering, it is found in presence. Presence is the ability to feel without drowning, to hold life's contradictions without becoming lost in them. True depth is not measured by how much pain you can endure, but by how fully you can embrace the wholeness of your being. This wholeness includes joy, play, creativity, and love qualities that often lie dormant beneath the weight of pain. One way to access this wholeness is through the power of imagination. The imagination is not mere fantasy. It is a bridge between the conscious and the unconscious, a way of bringing hidden truths into the light. I encourage you to engage in active imagination, a process I often used in my own work. Sit in silence, close your eyes, and allow an image to arise from your inner world. It may be a symbol of your pain, a dark forest, a wounded animal, a locked door. Speak to it as though it were alive. Ask it what it wants, but it needs to be free. This dialogue will reveal truths that your rational mind cannot access. It will show you where your pain comes from, and more importantly, how it can be transformed. Transformation is the essence of healing. Pain is not meant to be carried forever. It is meant to be transmuted like lead into gold. This is the work of the inner alchemist, the part of you that knows how to turn suffering into wisdom, wounds into gateways, and shadows into light. But this transformation cannot happen if you cling to pain as your identity. You must be willing to let it go, even if it feels like losing a part of yourself. You must trust that what remains a self is more than enough. I know this is not easy. The ego resists change, clinging to what is familiar, even if it is destructive. But the self calls you beyond the ego, beyond the narrow identity you have constructed. It calls you to become whole. This call often begins with a crisis, a moment when the pain becomes unbearable, when you can no longer continue as you are. This is not a punishment, it is an initiation. The psyche uses pain to awaken you, to push you toward growth. If you can see your suffering in this light as a catalyst rather than a curse, you will begin to shift your relationship with it. There is a dream I once interpreted that illustrates this shift. A man dreamed he was trapped in a burning house. At first, he panicked, trying to put out the flames with his hands. But then he stopped and looked around. He saw that the fire was not destroying the house, but purifying it, burning away the rot and decay. When he walked through the fire, instead of fighting it, he emerged on the other side, unlearned, stronger than before. This dream speaks to the nature of pain. It is not here to destroy you, but to burn away what no longer serves you. When you stop resisting and start learning, you move from being a victim of pain to a student of it. Empaths, your challenge is to stop defining yourself by the pain you absorb. You are not the world's sponge. You are not here to take on every wound. You are here to witness, to feel, but also to transform. To do this, you must cultivate practices that ground and replenish you. Meditation, breath work, time in nature. These are not luxuries, but necessities. They allow you to return to yourself, to separate what is yours from what is not. Without these practices, you will always be at the mercy of the world's emotions. There is a profound strength that comes when you realize that you do not need to fix or save anyone. This does not mean you stop caring. It means you care in a way that is clean, unburdened by the need for control or martyrdom. You can stand with someone in their suffering without taking it into your body. You can love without losing yourself. This is the highest form of empathy, a love that is both compassionate and free. I want you to imagine now that you are standing before a mirror. Look into your own eyes. What do you see? Do you see someone who is tired, worn down by caring too much? Do you see someone who has forgotten their own light? If so, I want you to speak these words. Silently or aloud, I am not my pain. I am not the pain of others. I am whole, even as I heal. These words are not just affirmations, they are incantations. Keys that unlock the deeper truths of your being. The more you speak them, the more your unconscious begins to shift, to loosen its grip on the addiction to pain. Healing is not about erasing your sensitivity. Your sensitivity is your gift. It allows you to connect, to create, to understand, but it must be tempered with wisdom. Wisdom is what teaches you when to open and when to close, when to give and when to receive. Without wisdom, empathy becomes a wound. With wisdom, it becomes a source of profound power. There is a moment in every empath's journey when they must turn inward and face the truth that their suffering is not a divine obligation, but a choice. This realization is both liberating and frightening. It shakes the foundations of who you believe yourself to be. You may ask, if I do not carry this pain, who am I? And the answer, whispered by the deeper layers of the psyche, is this: you are more than what you carry. You are the space through which all feelings pass. But you are not the feelings themselves. This is a great paradox of empathy. It is both a blessing and a burden. Without conscious awareness, it becomes a burden, binding you to the pain of others like an invisible chain. But when you awaken to your true nature, empathy becomes a channel for healing, not suffering. You begin to see that pain is not something to hoard or identify with, but the teacher that comes and goes, leaving behind the lessons it was meant to deliver. Imagine for a moment that you are standing on the shore of a vast ocean. The waves represent the emotions of the world, sometimes calm, sometimes violent. You are not the ocean. You are the observer standing on the shore. You may step into the water, feel its coolness or its storm, but you do not drown in it. This is the shift empaths must make to step back from the belief that they are the waves. Your task is to become the witness, to let the emotions of others move through you like water through open hands. One of the deepest roots of pain addiction lies in the belief that suffering makes you worthy of love. This belief is often planted in childhood, when love felt conditional, when you were praised for being quiet, for enduring, for taking care of others, even at your own expense. Over time, the inner child begins to associate pain with love, as if the only way to be seen is to suffer. This is why so many empaths fall into cycles of self-sacrifice. They are unconsciously trying to earn the love they believe they must fight for. To break this cycle, you must return to the child within you. Close your eyes and imagine this child, perhaps frightened, perhaps weary, perhaps still holding the burdens of others. Kneel before this child and say, "You do not need to hurt to be loved. You are loved simply because you exist." When you speak these words to your inner child, you begin to dissolve the lie that pain is your currency. You show yourself a love that does not demand suffering as proof. This work requires patience, for the unconscious does not yield its patterns easily. It will test you, pulling you back into old habits. You may find yourself drawn again to relationships or situations that demand your suffering. When this happens, do not judge yourself. Simply notice. Each time you notice, you weaken the hold of the old story. Each time you choose not to engage in the old pattern, you reclaim your power. Healing is not perfection, it is persistence. It is a quiet but steady act of choosing yourself again and again. The path of individuation, which I have spoken of many times, is the path of becoming whole. It is the journey of integrating all the parts of yourself, the shadow, the child, the healer, the dreamer, into a single, unified self. When you are addicted to pain, you are living only a fragment of who you are. You are identified with the wound, forgetting that beyond the wound lies the healer. The goal is not to erase your pain, but to integrate it, to allow it to become a source of wisdom rather than a chain. Consider the archetype of the phoenix, rising from the ashes of its own destruction. This is not just a myth, it is an image of the psyche's ability to renew itself. To overcome the addiction of pain, you must allow yourself to burn away the false identities you have clung to the martyr. The victim, the rescuer, these roles have served their purpose, but they cannot lead you to freedom. Freedom comes when you stand naked before yourself, stripped of all pretense, and say, "I am ready to be whole." This wholeness is not a distant dream. It is already within you, waiting to be uncovered. When you stop feeding the addiction to pain, you create space for joy, creativity, and love to emerge. You begin to live not as a reaction to the suffering of others, but as a conscious expression of your own being. You realize that your sensitivity, when balanced, is not a curse, but a compass. It guides you toward what is true, what is meaningful, what is real. Empaths often ask me, But what about the suffering in the world? How can I turn away from it? I tell them this: you do not turn away, but you also do not drown. You hold suffering with compassion, but you do not mistake it for your own. You learn to stand in the fire without being consumed. This is not detachment in the cold sense. It is sacred witnessing. When you are whole, your presence becomes healing. Not because you carry others' pain, but because you reflect back to them the possibility of their own wholeness. To live this way requires trust. Trust in life. Trust in yourself. Trust in the self. The self is like a deep river that flows beneath all your experiences, carrying you toward integration, even when you feel lost, even when pain seems overwhelming. The self is guiding you. When you align with it, you begin to see your life as a tapestry where even the darkest threads are woven into a larger pattern of meaning. Pain is not the whole story. It is only a thread. You must also learn the art of saying no. This may be the most difficult task for an empath, for you have been conditioned to believe that no is unkind, but no is sacred. It is the word that protects your energy, that guards the sanctity of your soul. When you say no to the pain that does not belong to you, you are saying yes to life. You are saying yes to your own healing, your own freedom. And in doing so, you inspire others to find their own strength. Let me share with you a vision. Imagine standing in a great hall filled with mirrors. Each mirror reflects a different version of you, the wounded self. The self who suffers for others. The self who hides. The self who gives everything. But in the center of the hall stands a single clear mirror. When you look into it, you see the self, the whole radiant being that has always been there, waiting for you to recognize it. As you gaze into this mirror, the other mirrors begin to shatter. One by one, the illusions fall away, and you are left with the truth. You are not your pain, you are not your past, you are the consciousness that can hold both shadow and light without being defined by either. As we come to the close of this journey, I want you to remember this pain is not your enemy, but neither is it your master. It is a teacher, and when its lesson is learned, it no longer needs to control you. The addiction to pain is a sign that you have forgotten your own power, but power is not something you need to acquire. It is something you need to remember. It is already within you, as innate as breath, as constant as the heartbeat. I urge you to begin this remembering today. Take one small step toward yourself, whether it is setting a boundary, speaking a truth, or simply allowing yourself to rest. Each small act of self-love is a declaration to the universe. I am ready to be whole. And when you make this declaration, the self responds. It rises within you like a sun, illuminating even the darkest corners of your being. You, dear empath, are not here to be consumed by the world's pain. You are here to transform it. Beginning with your own, you are here to walk the path of the healer, not as one who suffers endlessly, but as one who has found the courage to face their own shadow and emerge with light. This is the answer to addiction, to suffering, to the endless cycle of pain. It is not about rejecting your sensitivity, but about mastering it. It is about standing in your truth and saying, I choose life. I choose freedom. I choose wholeness. And so I leave you with this truth. You are more powerful than you know. You have within you the capacity to transmute every wound, every shadow, every ounce of pain into wisdom and strength. The path is not easy, but it is sacred. Walk it with courage, and you will discover that beyond the addiction to pain lies the vast and luminous self waiting, always waiting for you to come home